Follow the Leader, presented by Laura Bush. The concept of leadership is all around us. We have leaders that guide our nation, and we have leaders that guide teenagers and young adults through their lives. The study of leadership is very unique, because while a leader may have a specific set of skills and traits, their styles may change depending on their audience. As I explain the leader I chose to follow, we will see how an individual really must adapt to his or her audience to truly be an effective leader. The leader I chose to follow was my dad, Mr. Bush. Mr. Bush has been a special education teacher in the public school system for nearly 20 years now. But due to personnel changes, he is now a case manager for Dixie High School, which is a large public school in northern Kentucky. He is responsible for a small group of students and manages their daily education programs and services that are required by their Individualized Education Plan, an IEP. He is also responsible for co-teaching an Algebra 2 class with a regular education teacher, which allows him to make sure the lesson plans are modified to meet the needs of his group of students. If you were to meet Mr. Bush, you may not even realize it, but he is 100% deaf in one ear and 90% deaf in the other. He was born with some hearing loss, but lost most of it during his childhood. Luckily, this happened after he had already learned how to speak. Therefore, he has the ability and understanding of how to pronounce English-speaking words, which most deaf individuals cannot. Anyway, growing up deaf made his education very difficult. When Mr. Bush went away to college, he actually planned on becoming an architect. He received an associate's degree in drafting and design and a bachelor's degree in industrial design and management. But one day, when he was visiting his audiologist for a routine hearing checkup, he stopped in at the classroom for the hearing impaired children next door, and the rest was history. He started volunteering there to help teach young students and eventually decided to pursue a Master's of Education in the education of deaf and hard of hearing. Mr. Bush felt that by being able to share his own experiences with the students, he was really able to connect with them and help them through life with a disability. By pursuing a career in education, you're sort of forced to become a leader. A teacher must be a leader to their students, some only in the classroom, but others help lead students through their personal lives as well. In addition to leading students, teachers can also lead other teachers, just as they can also follow other teachers. Mr. Bush has been in 3 different positions in which he has 3 different audiences that he has had to show his leadership abilities. As a teacher, Mr. Bush was a leader to each individual student. As the president of the Greater Cincinnati Deaf Awareness Reaches Everyone organization, Mr. Bush was a leader to all of the members of the organization. And as a case manager, Mr. Bush was a leader to his small group of students, but he also had a leader/follower role in connection with the other teachers he had to collaborate with. While Mr. Bush is a case manager at the moment, he has spent over 20 years as a teacher of deaf students in the public school system. As a teacher, Mr. Bush prepared his own lesson plans according to the curriculum provided by the state. The main leadership style that he used with his students was a supportive style. Mr. Bush had to monitor and assess his own students' progress in line with the state standards. And while being in an environment with a deaf teacher and surrounded by other deaf students with the same learning goals, each individual student still needed more support. Mr. Bush made sure that when he saw students struggling with the materials, he would sit down and lend supporting and motivating words while guiding them through the problem. Being able to understand the help the student needs and identifying the best way to motivate them is a strength that Mr. Bush has demonstrated on multiple occasions. Mr. Bush also served as the president of the Greater Cincinnati Deaf Awareness Reaches Everyone organization. A major part of this position was getting the organization to work towards a common vision and set goals. He enjoyed articulating goals of the organization to make sure they were challenging yet reachable. He organized the members into individual committees working on different projects. Mr. Bush set the tasks of the committees, but then allowed the officer of the committee to have the freedom to develop the plan of action. He supported the committees to make their own decisions. This is seen as a delegative leadership style using operations planning behavior. Mr. Bush explained that they wanted to establish working committees which could develop future officers that would keep the organization growing in the future. This style enhances an individual's pride in their work that they are doing. It gave them the freedom to set their own plans and develop a greater self-confidence in their own skills. During the monthly organization meetings, Mr. Bush believed that it was important to point out those members that had done an extraordinary job to the entire group. By doing this, he believed it was very motivating and kept the morale high. Mr. Bush also believed that it was important to encourage the members to take lead within their own committees. He wanted to develop the staff so they could prepare themselves for a step up in the organization in the future. While he agreed with the vision of the organization, Mr. Bush admitted he did not think his leadership style was the best way to lead. Using a delegative style seemed to prove effective, but in the meetings, he used more of a participative style. He wanted to hear everyone's perspectives, and this led to decisions not being made on time, and also decisions being made by groupthink instead of what the best choice may have been. Therefore, he stepped down in his position as the president and is now part of the committee as a Northern Kentucky representative. As a case manager, Mr. Bush must work with other teachers to modify their lesson plans to fit the capabilities of his group of students that have their own IEP. Since there is one teacher he co-teaches with on a daily basis, I use their interaction as a basis for my analysis. To modify the lesson plans, Mr. Bush and the regular education teacher first analyze the standards set out in the state curriculum on what the students need to accomplish. Then, they assess each of the students in Mr. Bush's group on how they believe they will do in regards to the required material. Then they establish growth goals that the students need to hit in order to accomplish the standards set by the state. Employing this process helps them to keep the students on track with their required lesson plans. The interaction between the teacher and Mr. Bush can be described as a participative style of leadership. In this situation, Mr. Bush is more of a follower than a leader because he must adjust to the regular education teacher's subject, classroom, and teaching style. When they work together to modify lesson plans for the students, they share their own opinions on how the material should be taught, they consider each other's opinions, and then together formulate the goals. This creates a friendly work environment between the two while they work towards one common goal, the students' growth. The participative style is the best one to use when working with others that may be on the same level of authority as you are, because it allows them to work together instead of one person taking complete control. In regards to the students he works with, Mr. Bush must always assess their progress towards their individual growth goals. This exhibits the task-oriented leadership behavior of monitoring and assessing. Mr. Bush first observes how the students are involved in the class. Then he evaluates their progress based on their homework, quizzes, and test grades. After gathering this information, he will decide if any modifications need to be made for any of his students. These modifications can include allowing them to work in small or smaller groups, schedule time for one-on-one tutoring after school, or even slowing the class down and reteaching the material in a different way. After making modifications, he must assess if those modifications are helping the student better reach their goals. If they are, then the student's growth goals are met, then new material is introduced and the process starts all over again. By setting these goals and encouraging the students to strive for improvement, Mr. Bush is using an achievement-oriented style of leadership. To help them reach their goals, Mr. Bush makes sure he shows confidence in the students to make them feel more confident in themselves. Leaders are more prone to having certain traits and skills that allow them to be a better leader. From observing Mr. Bush, I noticed his positive traits include energy, willingness to assume responsibility, flexibility, and a service mentality. Mr. Bush exuded a genuine concern for his students and wanted to see them do well in school as well as in life. Not everyone is perfect, though. Mr. Bush displayed a participative style of leadership in the organization meetings because he was not confident in his own decisions. He wanted to include everyone in the decisions because he could not decide for himself. While this is not a complete detriment, the implications were that the organization was not meeting certain deadlines they needed to. The major skills that Mr. Bush demonstrated were communication, technical, and analytical skills. Analytical skills is one of the best skills to have as the teacher because the teacher needs to be able to break down the problem a student is having, see it the way the student sees it, and figure out what it is they are not understanding exactly. Once he is able to figure out the issues, communicating with the students is very important. As a teacher, you must be able to clearly explain the material or else the students are not likely to learn it. In regards to being an ethical leader, Mr. Bush has demonstrated that he practices a spiritual, ethical leadership style. Mr. Bush has a genuine concern for his students' learning. He wants to see them grow in the school system as well as in life. While Mr. Bush has been a teacher and a case manager to many students throughout his career, he says the most rewarding part is keeping in touch with them as they grow up. He is seen as a mentor to many of his students. They invite him to their high school and college graduations as well as many other life events. Mr. Bush admits that he learns just as much from his students as he teaches them. And while he knows how hard it is growing up as a deaf person in society, he is thankful that he can lend a helpful hand to those going through the same thing. In conclusion, to be an effective leader, you must have multiple leadership styles at your arsenal. Depending on the audience you must lead, one must adapt their style to fit their needs. Mr. Bush has displayed that while he may not be an expert at every leadership style, he can identify which style to use in the situation at hand to be able to lead his students or members of the organization. Throughout his various positions, Mr. Bush has used a supportive style, delegative style, participative style, and achievement-oriented styles of leadership to guide his followers.